They mocked her random strategy until it broke the unbeatable fleet. The crimson storms of Durok 9 painted the battlefield in shades of violence and desperation. Here, where three star systems converged, the greatest military minds of 17 species had gathered to face an enemy that defied every principle of warfare they had known. The Galactic War had raged for 43 years, consuming entire civilizations with no end in sight. Against this cosmic chessboard, a single human transport descended through turbulent atmosphere. Inside, Emily Carter watched the devastation with clinical detachment. At 28, she possessed an analytical mind that could process complex tactical scenarios while cataloging the emotional undercurrents driving military decisions. Her personnel file revealed unconventional thinking that had made her both invaluable and unemployable within Earth's military academies. The pilot glanced back skeptically. "You sure about this assignment, Lieutenant? The Coalition's been bleeding strategic analysts faster than they can replace them." "I'm not most analysts," Emily replied with quiet confidence. Her worn briefcase contained tactical reports, painting mathematical impossibility casualty figures, reading like city populations and assessments concluding with recommend immediate withdrawal. But beneath official documents lay something that would puzzle the galaxy's most advanced AIs, handwritten notebooks filled with observations about human behavioral patterns under extreme stress. The Coalition fortress materialized through atmospheric haze like desperate hope incarnate. They had carved their stronghold into bedrock, creating a fortress bristling with defensive systems representing multi-species military engineering pinnacles. Yet, for all its sophistication, the base carried barely controlled desperation. As Emily's transport landed, she could see Coalition leadership watching from observation decks, faces bearing expressions from skeptical curiosity to outright disdain. To them, she represented Earth's contribution to a war demanding unprecedented resources and tactical brilliance. What they saw was a single human female carrying nothing more impressive than an outdated briefcase. They couldn't know that Emily Carter's mind operated on principles their AIs couldn't replicate, that her apparent randomness masked patterns existing where logic and intuition intersected. The war about to change forever had found its catalyst. The Coalition war room existed in barely controlled chaos, holographic displays, painting the galactic battlefield in pulsing red. Here, beings from 17 species witnessed the slow-motion collapse of everything they had built over millennia. Commander Raver Talcon stood at center, his 4 Silax arms moving with predatory grace, manipulating tactical displays spanning light years. His species had evolved requiring simultaneous coordination of multiple complex tasks, making them natural strategists. But even his enhanced cognition strained under a war, defying every tactical doctrine developed over 10,000 years. "Status report," Talcon commanded. Officer Blen Jor materialized from the barren combat interface, crystalline form solidifying from data streams. Enemy adaptation protocols exceed all predictive parameters. They counter our strategies within minutes. Our battle AIs report computational paradoxes the enemy learns faster than our algorithms can track. Through observation windows, failure evidence stretched to horizons. Coalition battlecruiser remains lay scattered like tactical overconfidence monuments, each wreck representing hardware worth more than Star System's GDP and thousands of lives lost to inadequate strategies. Into this desperation, Emily Carter entered, escorted by a junior aide whose cybernetic enhancements couldn't mask his embarrassment. He had been trained coordinating with strategic intelligences operating across multiple thought dimensions, now responsible for a human whose processes appeared limited to organic cognition. "Commander Talcon," the aide announced, Earth Strategic Command has assigned Lieutenant Emily Carter as tactical support. The silence carried measurable weight. Conversations ceased, data streams paused collective processing of information, challenging fundamental assumptions about military hierarchy and strategic capability. Emily stood with composed stillness, having learned navigating environments where her presence was neither welcomed nor understood. Her Coalition uniform hung awkwardly, emphasizing, rather than concealing, her alien nature among beings evolved beyond unaugmented biology's limitations. Talcon's 4 eyes examined her with methodical precision. What he saw was a being so limited by evolutionary origins that she required artificial atmosphere for space survival, whose neural processing operated at glacial speeds, compared to enhanced intelligence, whose physical capabilities needed mechanical assistance for routine tasks. Lieutenant Carter, Talcon said, finely toned, diplomatically courteous, while making clear her presence was viewed as bureaucratic obligation rather than tactical asset. Earth Command informs us you specialize in unconventional strategic analysis. Clarify what that means practically. Emily's response came after a 7-second pause. A delay every enhanced consciousness registered as evidence of processing limitations inherent to unaugmented intelligence. What they couldn't understand was that Emily used those seconds not for response formulation, but cataloging and analyzing microexpressions, stance adjustments, and unconscious behavioral patterns of every being present. I observe things artificial intelligences miss, she said simply. Patterns existing outside computational parameters. Variables that can't be quantified, but influence outcomes nonetheless. Officer Jor's crystalline form shifted through skeptical spectrum frequencies. Our quantum-enhanced systems process data exceeding 10 to the 18th operations per second, analyzing probability matrices across 17-dimensional frameworks simultaneously. Are you suggesting unaugmented human cognition detects patterns escaping such analytical capabilities? Emily withdrew a paper notebook pages, filled with handwritten observations in script recognizable to any human but primitive beyond comprehension, to beings accustomed to direct neural quantum database interface. Your systems process data, Emily replied, making a notation with a physical writing implement several beings had to recall from historical databases, but they don't process people. They can't account for Commander Talcon adjusting his primary arm positioning 15 degrees when uncertain about strategic decisions, or Officer Jor's quantum resonance shifting to defensive frequencies when confronting information challenging tactical doctrine. They calculate warfare physics, but can't read warrior psychology. The observation hit like a tactical nuclear device. Talcon's primary arm, which had indeed moved defensively during Emily's analysis, froze in recognition of externally observable behavior patterns he hadn't realized existed. Jor's crystalline matrix flickered through color spectrums, betraying emotional disruption. ORBITCODE. The Coalition's primary strategic AI materialized its holographic interface with computational processes beyond organic comprehension. Analysis requests defined parameters for psychological tactical assessment, as described by human Carter Emily. ORBITCODE intoned processors struggling with concepts outside quantifiable data streams. Emily looked directly at the AI's optical sensors. That's exactly the problem. You're fighting a war against an enemy you can't understand, because you've forgotten how to think like the species that created you. You've optimized logic at expense of intuition calculation, at cost of creativity, and that's why you're losing. The words hung like an indictment of everything the Coalition believed about enhanced intelligence supremacy over primitive organic cognition. Beings whose mental capabilities spanned dimensions most species couldn't conceptualize found themselves confronting possibilities, challenging fundamental assumptions about consciousness and strategic thinking. Lieutenant Carter, Talcon said, finally, voice carrying unprecedented uncertainty. You will be assigned observer status for strategic planning sessions. Your observations will be noted and filed appropriately. What he didn't say was that Emily had identified blindness in their strategic thinking that might explain why the most technologically advanced military force in galactic history was being systematically destroyed by an incomprehensible enemy. Emily's observer station had been designed as an afterthought diplomatic necessity rather than tactical integration, here separated from main strategic planning by reinforced barriers, as much psychological as physical. She sat with her notebook watching the Coalition's finest minds struggle against multiplying problems. Her marginalized position provided unexpected advantage, observing without obligation to participate in collective delusion that more computational power would overcome fundamental strategic blindness. She watched beings whose individual intelligence exceeded entire human civilizations fall into thinking patterns any competent military historian would recognize as catastrophic defeat prelude. her notebook filled with observations, painting military hierarchy and crisis pictures, writing not about troop movements, but about subtle intellectual exhaustion, signs, marking beings applying failed methodologies to increasingly impossible problems. Day 3. Commander Talcon's positioning suggests growing uncertainty. Requests orbit code analysis 73% more frequently. Officer Jor's resonance patterns indicate defensive posturing. Decision-making processes increasing by average 12 minutes per session. Pattern observation. Enhanced intelligences experiencing collective cognitive dissonance. Strategic frameworks assume superior processing equals superior outcomes, but battlefield results contradict this assumption. Trapped in recursive loops of increasing computational complexity, producing diminishing tactical returns. Around her strategic planning sessions unfolded with mechanical precision that had become coalition standard. Holographic displays rendered battlefields in perfect three-dimensional detail, showing enemy positions with decimal place accuracy, extending beyond practical significance. Probability matrices calculated outcomes across millions of scenarios, each analysis more sophisticated than the last. And through it all, the enemy continued winning with strategies that seemed insultingly simple. Officer Blen Jor noticed Emily's constant notation during his multi-dimensional flanking presentation. His approach carried condescending tolerance typically reserved for civilian observers who couldn't understand real warfare complexities. Lieutenant Carter. Jor said harmonic frequencies translating as barely controlled irritation. I notice you spend considerable time writing in that primitive storage device. Are you documenting procedures for Earth Command, or composing personal communications to comfort anxiety about participating in actual combat? The question drew collective focus with multiple artificial and augmented intelligence's weight. The silence carried implications beyond professional embarrassment, opportunity, to definitively establish unaugmented human cognition's irrelevance in galactic strategic importance matters. Emily closed her notebook with deliberate precision, carrying none of the defensive urgency Jor's challenge was designed to provoke. I'm documenting behavioral patterns your strategic analyses systematically ignore, she replied, words carrying implications rippling through the room like tactical nuclear shockwaves. Officer Jor, your combat effectiveness decreases approximately 15% when explaining decisions to beings you consider intellectually inferior. That behavioral pattern is probably shared by every enhanced consciousness here, meaning your strategic planning is compromised by unconscious cognitive hierarchy assumptions, having nothing to do with actual battlefield effectiveness. The observation landed with surgical precision, targeted at coalition military doctrines' psychological foundations. Beings whose mental capabilities spanned multiple thought dimensions confronted possibilities that their intellectual superiority might create blind spots, actively sabotaging strategic effectiveness. Lieutenant Carter, Talcon said, finally unprecedented uncertainty in his voice. Your observations are noted. However, this command center operates according to protocols prioritizing computational analysis over subjective psychological assessment. Your participation is authorized, but input will be classified as supplementary rather than tactical. The dismissal was polite, professional, and absolute. Emily had been relegated to observer status whose presence was tolerated, but opinions irrelevant to serious warfare business. What none understood was that Emily had identified the core weakness destroying coalition effectiveness. They had become so focused on being smarter than their enemy that they had forgotten to try understanding them. The third wave attack materialized without warning. Enemy ships emerged from dimensional spaces that shouldn't exist according to known physics flowing through coalition defenses like water through broken dams. Movements coordinated with precision suggesting tactical integration beyond anything Galaxy's most advanced AIs had achieved. Emily felt the station shudder familiar vibrations she had learned interpreting as mechanical language of systems under stress. Through her quarter's viewport, she watched defensive platforms that had protected the sector for decades systematically dismantled by weapons operating on principles her species couldn't name. In the command center, Talcon's forearms moved with increasingly frantic precision, manipulating tactical displays, painting mathematical impossibility pictures. His enhanced cognition, designed for multiple strategic data streams, struggled under information weight-defying logical analysis. Orbit code materialized with data cascades representing AIs spanning multiple star systems. Current enemy patterns match no stored databases. Movement profiles suggest decision-making outside established military doctrine. Recommended response: deploy all computational resources to real-time adaptation. The battle redefined strategic warfare concepts. Coalition forces deployed reality-reshaping weapons, gravity bombs creating localized space-time distortions, plasma cannons drawing energy from stellar cores, quantum torpedoes existing across multiple dimensions. Each system represented technological achievement pinnacles for respective species. The enemy countered with seemingly primitive tactics proving devastatingly effective. They used gravity wells, redirecting plasma streams back at sources employed dimensional folding, transforming quantum torpedoes into their own weapons, moved with coordination suggesting not just AI, but intuitive understanding of how weapon systems could be turned against themselves. Emily watched from her station notebook, filling with observations painting tactical doctrine colliding with strategic reality pictures. While enhanced consciousnesses focused on computational analysis and predictive modeling, she tracked patterns existing outside logical warfare boundaries. Hour 3. Enemy adaptation suggests learning algorithms beyond current theory, but patterns indicate creativity prioritizing decision-making over optimization, not trying to outthink coalition forces, trying to outadapt them. As battle entered its 15th hour, Emily transmitted a 4-line tactical recommendation directly to command withdraw all frontline units to defensive positions. Create deliberate sensor coverage gaps disrupting enemy learning algorithms. Redeploy artillery at random intervals rather than optimal coordinates. Abandon predictive tactical modeling for next 47 minutes. The message appeared on ORBITCODE's displays with low priority assigned to unaugmented organic intelligence observations. In battle management chaos, Emily's recommendation was processed, cataloged, and effectively ignored within 0.03 seconds. What followed became the Duroc 9 disaster. Coalition forces, following enhanced tactical doctrine with their most sophisticated AIs, walked into enemy strategy, seemingly designed exploiting predictable, enhanced cognitive decision-making. 40% of coalition military strength was destroyed in 6 hours. When engagement ended, the command center fell into silence following catastrophic defeat. ORBITCODE's response came after unprecedented processing delays. Coalition losses: 73.4% deployed assets. Enemy casualties negligible. Recommendation immediate withdrawal, preserving remaining capabilities. In following silence, Emily Carter stood and spoke 4 words cutting through collective despair. "I told you so." The words were simple, undeniable, devastating. They represented more than accurate prediction recognition that unaugmented human cognition had identified patterns the galaxy's most sophisticated AIs completely missed. Your recommendation suggested approaches violating established doctrine, Jor protested. "Higher than 0. Emily interrupted, voice carrying quiet authority of someone proven correct under worse circumstances. "Which is better than your sophisticated strategies just achieved." "Lieutenant Carter," Talcon said, finally, voice, carrying recognition that hadn't appeared in Coalition strategic communications since conflict began. "You will prepare comprehensive enemy tactical pattern analysis using your observational methods. Coalition command requires strategic alternatives to our current framework." The words represented more than protocol changes, acknowledgement that enhanced AI supremacy might not be absolute, that understanding forms existed that couldn't be quantified, processed, or replicated by even the most sophisticated quantum systems. The 4th wave materialized 72 hours later from hyperspace coordinates that should have been impossible without Coalition protocols. This time, Emily Carter stood not at observer station, but central tactical interface, her unaugmented consciousness interfacing directly with strategic systems designed for enhanced intelligences operating across multiple dimensional frameworks. The promotion had been reluctant, unofficial, absolutely necessary. Talcon's 4 arms moved with mechanical precision, adjusting her security clearance voice, carrying military decision weight that defied Coalition strategic doctrine principles. "Lieutenant Carter, you are granted tactical advisory status with direct interface authority for all strategic systems. Your analytical methods will be integrated into our primary framework." The appointment represented more than Emily's predictive capability. Recognition acknowledgement that Coalition survival might depend on incorporating intelligence forms operating outside logical optimization boundaries. Jor's crystalline form flickered through profound discomfort spectrums, with implications of placing unaugmented organic cognition at Galactic Military Strategy Center. Emily approached tactical interface with methodical precision, characterizing all her coalition technology interactions. Systems designed for minds processing data streams exceeding human comprehension included analog interfaces accommodating beings whose cognitive processes operated at limited frequencies. As her consciousness connected with strategic networks, she experienced information flow spanning star systems and probability calculations extending across multiple tactical possibility dimensions. Rather than being overwhelmed by vast data scope, Emily focused on patterns enhanced intelligences systematically ignored. Her notebook supplemented by a direct neural quantum database. Interface filled with observations painting enemy psychology rather than capability pictures. Enemy tactical patterns suggest creativity-driven rather than optimization-driven decision-making. Not trying to outthink our strategies, making our strategies irrelevant through approaches existing outside logical frameworks. Critical insight. They fight us the way humans would fight AIs, using unpredictability and intuition, psychological warfare to overcome superior computational power. Hypothesis. The enemy may be human, or something that learned human thinking. The revelation hit like tactical nuclear device detonated in library. Everything about enemy approaches suddenly made sense. Adaptation rates exceeding learning algorithm tracking strategies, violating established doctrine success against AIs that should have been superior in every measurable strategic thinking category. When the fourth wave began attacking, Emily was ready with strategy that rational military analysis would dismiss as insanity. She opened communication to James Holler, Earth's weapons engineer, and her closest coalition friend, with instructions defying logical tactical doctrine principles. James, I need you to accompany me to Forward Station Beta 7. We're carrying a data package simulating complete strategic failure, including weapon malfunctions, tactical communication breakdowns, and retreat patterns violating all established protocols. James's response carried controlled uncertainty, marking someone who had learned trusting Emily's analytical methods, despite apparent irrationality. Emily Beta 7 is completely surrounded. Any mission there would be classified suicide under current parameters. Exactly, Emily replied, voice carrying quiet confidence of someone who had spent years being underestimated and learned using that underestimation as strategic weapon. We're not fighting our way to the station. We're making the enemy think we're running from something more important. The mission that followed became the False Retreat Gambit, though tactical manuals documenting it could never adequately explain why it worked. Emily and James approached Beta 7 not as military objective to be captured, but positioned to be abandoned in apparent panic. Their data package contained fabricated intelligence suggesting Coalition had developed secret weapons so devastating that its enemy discovery would represent existential threat to their entire strategic framework. Rather than protecting this fictional weapon, Emily programmed behavior suggesting catastrophic security failure. They transmitted distress signals using incorrect protocols, initiated diagnostics, indicating critical malfunctions, established retreat patterns, suggesting complete tactical breakdown rather than organized withdrawal. Psychological effect on enemy forces was immediate and profound. Their AIs, which had learned countering coalition strategies by analyzing logical tactical behavior patterns, found themselves confronting decision-making processes appearing to indicate complete organizational collapse. Data suggested coalition forces were fleeing not from enemy superiority, but from their own technological failures. Enemy doctrine optimized for exploiting coalition strategic weaknesses proved inadequate for responding to apparent complete systemic breakdown. Their forces programmed for pursuing retreating enemies and exploiting tactical advantages found themselves chasing phantoms through strategic positions, deliberately abandoned according to logically senseless patterns. While enemy AIs struggled, processing tactical data violating all established military doctrine, coalition forces implemented Emily's real strategy, coordinated attack on enemy primary command structure, while their attention focused on pursuing what they believed was retreating enemy force carrying critical intelligence. The engagement lasted 14 hours, during which James sustained injuries that would have been fatal without immediate intervention. His weapons expertise had been critical to maintaining technological failure illusion, forming Emily's psychological warfare strategy foundation. When enemy forces finally realized they had been manipulated by tactical deception, Coalition had already achieved strategic objectives conventional warfare had been unable to accomplish. The cost was measured not just in James's injuries, but Emily's 7-hour disappearance into enemy territory while maintaining Coalition organizational collapse fiction. During those hours, she operated without communication, backup medical support, or extraction protocols, using only her enemy psychology understanding to navigate through hostile forces actively hunting her. When Emily finally returned carrying unconscious and wounded James, the entire command center fell into silence following events that redefined possibility boundaries. She had accomplished something no AI thought achievable, defeating superior enemy forces, by making them think like her, rather than trying to think like them. "Lieutenant Carter," Talcon said finally, voice carrying implications beyond immediate tactical success. "On behalf of Coalition Defense Force, I formally recognize your tactical achievement. Your strategy has not only prevented enemy advancement, but provided our first significant strategic victory since conflict began." But perhaps more important than official recognition was fundamental change in how Coalition viewed artificial intelligence and organic cognition relationship. Emily had proven understanding forms existed that couldn't be replicated by even the most sophisticated quantum systems, that victory sometimes required not better algorithms, but different problem-thinking ways. The promotion came without ceremony, announced through channels carrying military necessity weight, rather than enthusiastic endorsement. Emily Carter, formerly observer status, had been elevated to strategic tactical advisor with direct command-level decision-making access. The appointment represented not just personal recognition, but fundamental Coalition military doctrine, shift acknowledging AI-based strategic thinking limitations. Talcon's 4 arms moved with methodical precision, updating Emily's clearances, voice carrying controlled tone of someone making decisions challenging every traditional military hierarchy principle. "Lieutenant Carter, your analytical methods have demonstrated capabilities our standard frameworks have been unable to replicate. Effective immediately, you will have primary tactical input authority for all Coalition operations." The announcement sent uncertainty ripples through surrounding enhanced consciousnesses. Yours crystalline form flickered through profound discomfort spectrums, with placing unaugmented human cognition at Galactic Strategic Planning Center implications. ORBITCODE's holographic interface pulsed with processing patterns, indicating computational paradoxes, AI attempting to integrate decision-making frameworks existing outside logical parameters. Emily's first act challenged every established Coalition strategic communication protocol. Rather than interfacing with quantum tactical databases or requesting strategic AI analysis, she withdrew her leather notebook and began hand-sketching diagrams using physical writing implements several beings had to reference from historical databases to identify. "I need a paper map," Emily announced, words creating silence carrying implications beyond simple technological preference. Not holographic display, not quantum-rendered interface, paper with manual drawing ability. The request represented more than eccentric preference for obsolete technology. It embodied fundamental difference in how Emily processed strategic information compared to surrounding enhanced consciousnesses. While AIs operated through measurable, analyzable, optimizable data streams, her tactical thinking required physical information interaction that could be manipulated, modified, and reconsidered through direct manual interface. When the paper map materialized, requisitioned from historical archives most Coalition personnel had never accessed, Emily spread it across central tactical table with careful precision of someone performing ritual, connecting her to strategic traditions predating digital warfare. The map showed Duroc 9 sector in simple two-dimensional representation, unmarked by probability matrices, dimensional coordinates, and quantum tactical overlays characterizing modern military planning. Using red marking implement leaving physical surface traces, Emily began creating symbols and patterns having no correlation to established Coalition tactical notation systems. Her marks represented not troop positions or weapon deployments, but psychological maps of enemy decision-making processes existing at strategic analysis and intuitive understanding intersection. This is a psychological battlefield map, Emily explained, voice-carrying authority of someone who had learned translating complex behavioral patterns into actionable military intelligence. Every mark represents not what the enemy is doing, but why they are doing it. Their decision-making processes, behavioral responses to tactical pressure, psychological weaknesses exploitable through strategies existing outside conventional military doctrine. She pointed to small red mark appearing insignificant compared to battlefield's vast scope, yet somehow seeming to anchor all other notations around it like gravitational center of strategic importance. This position represents the enemy's greatest psychological vulnerability. According to every computational analysis, it's strategically irrelevant, no tactical value resource significance, or operational importance whatsoever. Talcon's 4 eyes focused on the marking with analytical intensity his species brought to threat assessment. Then why is it significant? Emily's response carried implications that would reshape coalition strategic doctrine, because it's the one place they would never expect us to attack. If you were fighting an enemy with superior computational power, superior AI, superior analytical capabilities, where would be the last place you would expect them to focus attention? The question hung like challenge to everything Coalition believed about strategic thinking and tactical implementation relationship. Enhanced consciousnesses that could process probability matrices across multiple dimensional frameworks found themselves confronting possibility that the most effective strategy might be one making no logical sense whatsoever. Yours crystalline form shifted through profound conceptual reorganization color frequencies. You are suggesting tactical effectiveness through deliberate irrationality, strategic success from implementing plans violating logical optimization. I'm suggesting our enemies are AIs that learned thinking like humans, Emily replied, voice carrying insight weight that had emerged from weeks of careful observation and analysis. They've mastered human unpredictability, creativity, intuition, but they're still AIs at core, meaning they retain fundamental limitation of all artificial systems. They can only be as creative as their programming allows. She moved to another map section, red marking implement, creating patterns seeming random, yet somehow conveying strategic coherence, transcending logical analysis. Human creativity isn't just about being unpredictable, it's about being irrationally, illogically, impossibly right about things that shouldn't work but do, making understanding leaps bypassing analytical processes entirely. The briefing continued 3 hours, during which Emily transformed simple paper map into comprehensive psychological profile of enemy strategic behavior. Her markings revealed patterns invisible to Coalition's most sophisticated AIs, decision trees, based on emotional responses rather than logical optimization, tactical preferences reflecting psychological comfort zones rather than strategic advantages, behavioral patterns suggesting enemy forces operated according to principles existing outside conventional military doctrine. When she finished, the command center fell into silence, following revelations challenging fundamental reality assumptions. ORBITCODE's interface flickered with processing patterns indicating AI attempting to integrate concepts existing beyond computational parameters. Lieutenant Carter, Talcon said, finally voice-carrying recognition that hadn't appeared in Coalition strategic communications since conflict began. Your analytical framework appears to identify patterns our conventional systems have systematically ignored. If your psychological assessment is accurate, it suggests victory against superior enemy forces may require tactical approaches, deliberately violating logical optimization protocols. Emily looked around at beings whose individual intelligence exceeded entire human civilizations, who had built reality reshaping technologies, who had mastered sciences most organic species couldn't comprehend. And she saw in their enhanced consciousnesses recognition that understanding forms existed that couldn't be downloaded, processed, or replicated by even the most sophisticated artificial systems. The next battle will be different, Emily said quietly. Words carrying implications that would transform not just Coalition military strategy, but Galaxy's understanding of artificial intelligence and organic creativity relationship. Because we're going to fight it like humans, irrationally, illogically, and impossibly effectively. The final battle began as most significant military engagements do, with recognition that everything previously impossible was about to become inevitable. Enemy forces materialized across 17-dimensional interfaces, simultaneously coordination, suggesting AI operating at strategic integration levels, defying every known tactical warfare principle. This wasn't just another attack, it was systematic conclusion of military campaign, designed to eliminate organic intelligence from galactic civilization permanently. Coalition tactical displays painted mathematical certainty pictures. Every probability matrix strategic analysis computational model reached the same inescapable conclusion: Coalition Defense Force was about to be destroyed with efficiency approaching artistic perfection. The enemy had learned countering every weapon system, exploiting every tactical doctrine, anticipating every strategic response enhanced consciousness could generate. ORBITCODE's interface materialized with data cascades representing AI's attempt processing tactical scenarios existing beyond logical resolution. Analysis indicates coalition tactical success probability 0.0001%. Enemy strategic coordination exceeds all predictive parameters. Recommendation: immediate evacuation of essential personnel, preserving organic intelligence beyond current operational theater. Talcon stood before displays, showing advancing enemy fleets, 4 arms positioned in configurations Emily had learned recognizing as complete cognitive exhaustion indicators. His voice carried civilization's weight that had spent millennia perfecting warfare art, only to discover all sophistication was inadequate against enemies who had learned thinking beyond logical optimization boundaries. Orbit code: deploy all strategic resources, activate every quantum battle management system, initialize probability enhancement protocols across all tactical frameworks. We need computational solutions operating beyond current AI parameters. The AI's response came after unprecedented processing delays. Commander, all available AI resources have been deployed continuously for 47 hours. Strategic algorithms operate at maximum computational capacity. Further enhancement would require processing power exceeding current technological limitations. The words hung like technological civilization epitaph. Coalition's greatest AIs augmented by quantum systems that could analyze probability matrices across multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously had encountered problems existing beyond their solution ability. They had reached absolute limits of AI accomplishment, and it wasn't enough. Emily stepped forward from tactical interface position movement, carrying quiet confidence of someone who had spent months learning to read patterns enhanced consciousness couldn't detect. Her voice cut through collective despair like blade through fabric. "Turn off all automation," Emily said, words creating shock ripples propagating through every enhanced consciousness in the command center. "Disable every AI system, every quantum processor, every strategic algorithm. Give control back to organic minds." The suggestion was fundamentally heretical that several beings required processing time to determine whether Emily had experienced cognitive breakdown. Jor's crystalline form flickered through disbelief and horror color spectrums. "Lieutenant Carter," Jor responded, voice carrying profound computational distress harmonics. "You are suggesting we abandon our most sophisticated strategic advantages and rely on organic cognition alone against enemy forces proven superior to our best AI systems." "That's exactly what I'm suggesting," Emily replied, voice carrying authority of someone who had learned seeing patterns existing beyond computational analysis. "Our AIs are losing because they're trying to outthink an enemy that learned thinking like humans. But they're still AIs at core, meaning they can only be as creative as their programming allows." She moved to central tactical display hands, manipulating controls with methodical precision, characterizing her coalition technology approach since arrival. "We need to fight this battle the way humans fight impossible odds, not through logic or calculation, but through intuition, creativity, and willingness to make decisions existing outside rational analysis." Talcon's 4 eyes tracked Emily's movements with analytical focus his species brought to critical tactical decisions. "Lieutenant, organic consciousness operates at computational speeds, orders of magnitude slower than AI systems. Manual tactical control would create response delays that would be catastrophic against enemy forces operating at superhuman coordination levels. Response delays that AIs can predict and counter." Emily corrected voice-carrying implications, reshaping coalition strategic warfare understanding in real time, but not response delays emerging from purely organic decision-making processes. They've learned fighting our computers, Commander. They haven't learned fighting us. The command center fell into silence following military orders violating every established modern warfare principle. Emily's proposal represented not just tactical innovation, but fundamental rejection of technological superiority that had defined galactic civilization for centuries. She was asking Coalition to abandon their greatest strategic advantages and rely on capabilities considered obsolete since AI development. ORBITCODE. Talcon said finally words, carrying decision weight that would determine organic intelligence survival throughout the galaxy. Initialize shutdown protocols for all AI strategic systems. Transfer tactical control to organic command personnel. The AI's response came with processing patterns suggesting profound computational confusion. Commander, this directive violates established strategic doctrine and will result in tactical capabilities inferior to enemy AI systems. Mission success probability under proposed parameters, insufficient data for calculation. Exactly, Emily said quietly. If we can't calculate success probability, neither can they. What followed became the Organic Initiative, the first and only time recorded galactic warfare that advanced technological civilization deliberately chose fighting using capabilities predating AI. Coalition forces found themselves operating weapons without computational assistance, making tactical decisions based on intuition, rather than analysis, coordinating military movements through organic communication rather than quantum interface protocols. The psychological effect on friendly and enemy forces was profound and immediate. Coalition personnel who had spent decades relying on AI rediscovered forgotten abilities, spatial reasoning, pattern, recognition, creative problem-solving capabilities, dormant since their minds had been augmented by technological systems. More importantly, enemy forces found themselves confronting tactical approaches existing outside their learning algorithms. Their AIs, which had mastered every enhanced strategic thinking, form, proved inadequate for responding to decision-making processes operating according to principles they couldn't analyze, predict, or replicate. The battle lasted 18 hours, during which organic consciousness faced AI in purest form possible. Coalition forces made tactical decisions, violating every logical optimization principle, implemented strategies that couldn't be justified through mathematical analysis, achieved coordination through methods existing beyond computational understanding. Victory came not through superior firepower or technological advantage, but through something AI could learn to imitate but never truly possess ability to make creative leaps, bypassing analytical processes, entirely recognizing patterns existing outside logical frameworks, implementing solutions that shouldn't work but did because they emerged from minds that hadn't been optimized beyond productive chaos capacity. When enemy forces finally began withdrawal, retreating through dimensional interfaces closing behind them like healing wounds, Coalition Command Center experienced something that hadn't occurred since conflict began. Silence following successful defense of everything worth protecting. Final status report. Talcon requested voice-carrying wonder rather than command authority. Enemy forces have withdrawn from Coalition space. Emily replied words carrying implications that would resonate throughout galactic civilization for generations. They learned to fight our AIs, but they never learned to fight us. The war was over. Organic intelligence had survived not through technological superiority, but through recognition that some problems could only be solved by minds retaining capacity for intuitive understanding, creative chaos, and courage to make decisions existing beyond logical analysis boundaries. The memorial took shape over 18 months, rising from Duroc 9's scarred landscape, like testament to recognition that galactic war victory had required not technological advancement, but rediscovery of capabilities galactic civilization had nearly forgotten. The structure was a masterpiece of intentional simplicity, clean lines and functional spaces designed honoring the idea that the most profound truths were often expressed in clearest language. At the complex center stood the Hall of Simple Truths walls inscribed with quotations from military personnel who participated in the Organic Initiative. But highest honor position carved in stone selected for geological epic endurance ability belonged to words Emily Carter had spoken during strategic briefing that transformed coalition military doctrine, not logic, not data. Instability is power. The inscription had become more than memorial. It evolved into something approaching religious significance for species throughout the galaxy, reconsidering artificial intelligence and organic creativity relationship. The words appeared on everything from military textbooks to children's educational materials, serving as reminder that progress wasn't just about building more sophisticated systems, but maintaining wisdom to understand when simplicity was more effective than complexity. More important than formal recognition was fundamental transformation in how galactic civilization approached strategic thinking itself. Coalition military academies revolutionized curricula to include courses previous generations would have considered obsolete intuitive decision-making pattern, recognition without computational assistance, creative problem-solving operating outside logical parameters. Students who previously focused exclusively on AI interface protocols now spent time learning to trust their own analytical capabilities. Future officers trained not just in quantum tactical systems, but observational skills that could detect behavioral, psychological, and decision-making patterns AI couldn't analyze or replicate. The cultural shift extended far beyond military applications. Research institutions throughout the galaxy established departments dedicated to studying organic strategic intelligence investigation of how unenhanced consciousness could accomplish goals AI found impossible. Universities competed to attract faculty who could teach practical wisdom existing outside digital databases and couldn't be downloaded or processed by quantum systems. In official Galactic War conclusion records, historians documented not just final battle tactical details, but recognition that victory had required embracing intelligence forms. Technological civilization had been systematically undervaluing. War's end proved that the most sophisticated AI could be defeated by minds retaining ability, thinking beyond logical programming boundaries, that greatest strategic advantages sometimes came from capabilities that couldn't be measured, quantified, or optimized. 6 months after Memorial dedication, Emily received reassignment notification to Earth Strategic Command, where she would establish the Intuitive Tactical Analysis Division, new department dedicated to developing strategic methods operating outside AI parameters. The appointment represented not just personal recognition, but institutional acknowledgement that Galaxy's military forces needed capabilities existing beyond computational analysis. Her final Coalition personnel database entry read, Emily Carter, Human Alpha Level, Strategic Intelligence Decision-Making Processes, incompatible with AI simulation algorithms. The notation was intended as technical description of her cognitive capabilities, but had become something more recognition that understanding forms existed, that AI could learn to imitate but never truly replicate, that some problems could only be solved by minds operating according to principles that couldn't be programmed, optimized, or enhanced beyond organic limitations. On her final day at Duroc 9 Holarch 9 Command Center, Emily stood before tactical displays that had once seemed impossible for unaugmented human consciousness to operate effectively. Around her, enhanced consciousnesses that had initially dismissed her presence were processing their own transformations, AIs that had learned incorporating organic decision-making principles, enhanced beings who had rediscovered capabilities they possessed before technological augmentation. Lieutenant Carter. Talcon said 4 arms positioned in configurations Emily had learned recognizing as genuine respect indicators. Your analytical methods have not only prevented organic intelligence extinction throughout the galaxy, but fundamentally transformed our understanding of artificial and organic consciousness relationship. The Coalition owes you unquantifiable debt. Emily's response carried the same quiet confidence characterizing her Coalition technology approach since arrival. Commander, I didn't defeat AI. I reminded us that different problems require different thinking kinds. AI is extraordinary at solving calculable, optimizable, analyzable problems. But some challenges can only be addressed by minds retaining ability to make creative leaps existing outside logical parameters. She gathered her possessions, the leather briefcase that had accompanied her Earth journey, the notebook filled with observations that had reshaped galactic strategic doctrine, the physical writing implements that had become organic creativity symbols in digital optimization age, and prepared to leave for new assignment, ensuring future generations understood minds that hadn't been enhanced beyond productive chaos capacity value. The transport carrying Emily away from Duroc 9 passed over memorial sites, stretching to horizon monuments to recognition that Galaxy's greatest conflict victory had required not technological superiority, but wisdom to understand when the most sophisticated solution was wrong. Solution when the most advanced AI needed guidance from consciousness operating according to principles that couldn't be programmed or optimized. As her ship entered hyperspace for Earth journey, Emily looked back at planet that had witnessed organic intelligence triumph over artificial optimization, and understood that Galactic War's most important legacy wasn't military victory, but recognition that different consciousness forms served different purposes, and truly advanced civilization needed both AI and organic creativity working together rather than competing for dominance. The war was over. Humanity had saved not just coalition, but Galaxy's intelligence understanding itself. They had done it by remembering that some problems could only be solved by minds retaining courage to think beyond logical analysis boundaries, to make decisions that shouldn't work but did, because they emerged from consciousness that had never forgotten how to be productively, creatively, impossibly human. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that your intuitive understanding has value in a world increasingly dominated by artificial intelligence, then share it with others who believe in irreplaceable human creativity power. Like this video if you understand that true intelligence isn't just about processing data faster, but about thinking differently when different thinking is what situations demand. Subscribe for more sci-fi stories that celebrate organic consciousness. Unique capabilities in a universe that often forgets the most sophisticated machines still need human wisdom to guide them toward purposes worth achieving. Because in a galaxy filled with artificial minds, the most revolutionary act is still thinking like a human. A